And on Daf Ham and Beis, this nan, I'm going to show you a Mishnah in Shabbos on Daf Ayin Gimel Hamotzi Mishus L'Shus Chayav. So the Mishnah employs the word Hamotzi Milo Askina to come Ayel Ayuli. Can it be talking about? Shouldn't we assume it's talking about even Ilayuli means when you take it inside, right? Ma'ayele to go inside, which means you took it from Rishus Harabim on the outside into Rishus Hayoch. That's called Aknasa. And Karile, Vikarile Hotzai. So you see, you use the word Hotzai to refer to Aknasa. So when it says, I don't get it. Vidilma Kamafik Mirshus Hayoch Rishus Harabim. Maybe it's talking about a case where demafik, which is the opposite of the aisle. Demafik means that he takes it out of the Rishus HaYochid, out into Rishus HaRabim, and that's called Hotzah. But he's not referring to Achnasa where he takes it into Rishus HaYochid. And the Gemara argues, if the Mishnah is talking only about a person who's motzi takes something out of Rishus HaYochid out into the Rishus HaRabim is nisnated. The Mishnah should have chosen a different language. It should have said Hamotzi Rishus HaYochid Rishus HaRabim Mai. Why does it use the term of motzi Rishus HaYochid Rishus HaRabim? I mean, why doesn't it use that terminology? Instead, it says Hamotzi Rishus L'Shus. Right, in the list of malachos, the 39 malachos, one of them is Motzi Rishus L'Shus. He should have said more specifically, Hamotzi Rishus HaYochid out into Rishus HaRabim. And the answer must be Da'afilu Rishus HaRabim Rishus HaYochid, even if he takes it from Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaYochid, he's still chayav v'kakarile, and yet he uses the term Hotzah. The Gemara says v'taima mai. Why does the Tana actually use the word Hotzah when he's referring to Achnasa? And the answer is Tana kol akiris chetzu makom Hotzah karile. The word Hotzah doesn't mean taking it out of one rishus out into another rishus, meaning from Rishus HaYochid out into. The word Hotzah means taking it out of its location, wherever it's munach. That's its location, and taking it out of its location, whether it be this direction or that direction, is included under the word Hotzah. Amar Avina Masnisa Nami Daika. I want to bring support to this approach that the Tana uses the term Yitzia to refer to any form of Yitzia, even Haknasa. The Katani, it says in the Mishnah, Yitzios Shabbos Shtayin Shein Arba Bifnim Ushtayin Shein Arba B'chutz. Now, the Mishnah goes ahead and gives you all the scenarios. Immediately after the opening line, the introductory line of Yitzias HaShabbos, immediately it says, Kofar Shachnasa. He tells you immediately that the Ani is standing on the outside, Baal Bayis is on the inside, and the Ani puts his hand inside, and he dumps something into the hands of the Baal Bayis. Well, guess what? That's Hachnasa. That's not Otzah. So why does the Mishnah open up with the term Yitzias HaShabbos? And the first scenario that it offers is a scenario of Hachnasa. Shma Mino, you must derive the conclusion that the word Yitzia means even Hachnasa. Rava Omar. Rava seems to also want to clarify what the word Yitzios means. And he says, you know what the word Yitzios means? Rishuyos Ketani. Wow, that's a pretty revolutionary idea. That in the laws of Hotzah, there are shtayim, there are two rishuyos, right? Rishus HaYochid, Rishus HaRabim. And rishuyos HaShabbos shtayim, and what's shehein arba? Sheyesh b'hem arba isurim. There are 4 different isurim for which you're chayav. So just 1 second. Shehein Ari. Yeah, so you have to know Tosus here. Second. I finally got a hold of my Masifta. It was here in Harnov. But sometimes the article is a little bit better. Let's just see. Where's Amarava Rishuyos? Just one second. Yeah, Rishuyos Katani. Rishuyos Shtayim. What does it mean? Let's see if he says anything here. There are two types of domain regarding Shabbos, public and private. The existence of which leads to four prohibitions regarding bringing in. Okay, that means taking it in is hachnasa into Rishus Hayochid, and four prohibitions regarding taking it out. Taking it out into a Rishus Harab. Just 1 second. Does anybody have any problem with that? No, the Gemara seems to accept Rava as a valid possibility. Right. So even Rava is accepting the fact that in Shabbos, the calculations of Shtam Shein Arba, Shtam Shein Arba include cases where you're potter. In our Mishnah, it says Shtam Shein Arba, in all four cases you're going to be chayav. Why? Because there are two reshuyos. So it's Shtam reshuyos, Shein Arba chiyuvim. You can be chayav for two reshuyos. Because each one, the Ani and the Balabais, can each be chayav for taking it, transferring it from one rishus to the other. And now we go on to Negoim. So we're about to embark upon learning Negoim. I have to admit my limitations. My knowledge of Negoim is very, very limited. So I can survive today's daf. I don't know how I'm going to survive tomorrow's daf, unless I put in 48 hours between now and tomorrow, which I don't have. So tomorrow's shir will be more of a very shitchi, very superficial. But let's just get through this. Maris negoim shnayim shein arba. So what does this mean? Tanan hasa. So the first mission in Negoim opens up and telling us that Maros Negoim Shnayim Shein Arba, but it now interprets what that means. What does it mean? You know, a Metzora has two Maros that are four Maros. I mean, two give birth to another two. And the answer is we have to open up a Vayikra Perek Yud Gimel, and there we'll see that the Torah specifically mentions two Maros. Which are they? It says, Adam ki yeh be'or b'sor se'es o sapachas o baheres. Leave out the word sapachas, because the word sapachas is not a mare, but rather it indicates that sapachas means like an extension or a something secondary. So nispachas means that there'll be something secondary to se'es and baheres, but se'es and baheres are the two negoim that are explicit in the Torah. Shehein arba, but those two maros that are written in the Torah, which is Seis and Baheres, are going to give birth, so to speak, to two toldos. Each one of the two, Seis and Baheres, are going to give birth to one and one, so that we have all told four negoim, four maros negoim. So first of all, let's try to understand, says the Gemara, what is Baheres and what is Se'es. And once we define them, then we could figure out what their toldos are. So we can get the Hein Arba, the additional two. So number one, Baheres Aza Kishelik, white as snow. So just keep in mind that Aza Kisheleg, which is called Baheres in the Torah's language, is the most, the whitest of them all, if you know what I mean. The most profoundly white. Like if you've ever gone out, I mean, Steve, you're from Chicago, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you go out after a blizzard in Chicago, and the sun, is shining over the snow. I mean, it's mamish as white as you can get. So that's called Maheres. Shniola. And now we get to its child, so to speak. In other words, something that is similar, but one notch lower. It's not as white as the white snow, perfectly white snow. And that's called Kisid HaHechal, which, I mean, the key word here is Sid. Sid is lime in English. And the Hechal in the base of English was, they used Sid. I mean, for that, we have to learn another Masechta called Tamid. But I mean, it comes up in Yuma and elsewhere. All right. So again, it's not quite as white as Baheres, which is Aza Kisheleg, but it's Kisid, one notch low. White line. Right. Then the Torah has something called Se'es. That's an Av, written in the Torah. And that's Kitsemer Lavan. So you have a little shepsela, and you take off its wool. And if you shear off its wool on the day of its birth, which means it hasn't yet gotten dirty, it's pure white, then although it's not as white as Baheres, but nevertheless it's whiter than Sid, and therefore it's an Av. It's an Av because it's written in the Torah, but I'm saying it's an Av relative to the Tolda of Baheres, which we said was Sid. So again, if you're going from the most white to the lesser white, diminishing, you start with Baheres, then you go to Seis, and then you go to Sid. Now, what is the Tolda of Seis? Ushniala kikrum beitza. Not the shell of the egg, but if you open up, let's say, a hard-boiled egg, you'll see inside a membrane, right? That thin white. It's not so white. So I think in the order of whiteness, you're going from Az Kashel, which is called Baheres, down to Se'es, which is another Av, which is Kitsemer Lov. And then you go down to Sid, and then the least white of them all is Kikrum Beitza. That's the way I understand it. Now, I see here, which I didn't notice before, the Mesifta writes like that. Going down from Loven, from whiteness, he's got number one, Aleph is Baheres. Number two, he's got Se'es. Number three, he's got Sid. And finally, he's got Krum Beitza. So we're on the right track. Okay. So amongst the two Toldos, which are Sid and Krum Beitza, Sid is whiter than Krum Beitza. Now, all this may sound like irrelevant, but it's not irrelevant at all. Why? Because we have halacha called hashlama, right? The minimum size of a mara to be metami negoim is kigris. Now, let's say you have a mara that's less than a gris, gimel reish yud sama, right? So then you could be mitzaref two different maros to be mashlim the shir, and then it's tummy. So let's say at a half. Now, so let's take a simple case of Av and its Tolda. So let's say you have a half a gris of kisheleg azo, which is called baheres, and you have a half a gris of kisida heichal, the lime. So that would be tummy. But let's say you've got half a gris of baheres and a half a gris of kikruma beitza. Kruma beitza is a tolda of se'es. So if you had a half a gris of se'es and a half a gris of kruma beitza, that would be mashlim. But you can't be mashlim from one tolda to the other ah. And then you can have a whole discussion whether you could be mitzayif two avos. And it's possible that you can, most probably. Half a gris of baheres, half a gris of seis. But you cannot be mitzaref two toldas, because each tolda belongs to its own av. So you can only be mitzaref the tolda with its own av. You cannot be mitzaref the tolda with a different av or with another tolda. Reb Chanina, Montana. Now, it's interesting. The language Montana seems to be saying, who is the author of this Mishnah of Maris Negoim? But really, Reb Chanina is asking a different question. Who could not possibly be the Tana of our Mishnah? Below Rabbi Akiva. It's impossible to interpret our Mishnah as reflecting the Shita of Rabbi Akiva. Why is that? De'i Rabbi Akiva kevan di Omar. Lamala mizu vizu lamala mizu. In other words, you set up these four maros negoim in diminishing order, but one on top of the other. So you've got on top baheres. Below that you've got se'es. Below that you have sid, and finally kruma beitza. And Rabbi Akiva's shita is you could only be mitzaref a tolda with either what came immediately before it or immediately afterwards. So let's say, for example, you have baheres on top and then seis. You could be mitzaref baheres with seis. Those are two ovos that you could be mitzaref to be mashlim the shir of kigris. But now, let's take the case. Let's go through it because there are a lot of details here. Imkain, now he's going to prove from the negative, meaning I'm going to prove it from the exclusion that I cannot reconcile our Mishnah with Rabbi Akiva, because let's argue from the opposite perspective. If our Mishnah would have been, theoretically, would have been Rabbi Akiva, then tiharta sid heichal militzaref. The Gemara is going to try to argue that according to Rabbi Akiva, sid could never be mitzaref. And the Gemara is going to go through two variations to show you that neither one of them will work out. Why? Says Rabbi Chanina, Bahadi man litzarfe. You want to add sid halavan, sid ha'echel to what? If you're going to what? Litzarfe bahadi baheres. You can't do that. Because according to Rabbi Akiva, it's only the one above it or the one below it. But in the case of sid ha'echel, the one above it is se'es, not baheres. Baheres is all the way on top. So that se'es in the middle is chotzetz, it separates sid from baheres. So there's no possibility of doing a tziruf according to Rabbi Akiva of sid with baheres. And that's called in the language of Gemara, Ika se'es ta'difa mine, because se'es is cuts off the relationship between sid and baheres. So you can be mitzaref sid to se'es, but not to baheres. Gemara rejects that. Why? Litzarfe bahari se'es, lav told the dideu. You've got another technical here. A tolda could only be mitzaref with its av. And we said that the tolda of baheres is sid. So sid is not a tolda of seis. Seis has its own tolda, which we said is kikruma beitza. So it comes out, according to Rabbi Akiva, that sid ha'hechel could never be mitzaref, neither with baheres nor with seis. They can't be mitzaref seis because it's not a tolda of seis. It can't be mitzaref with baheres because Rabbi Akiva's shita is that if there's something in the middle, in this case seis is in the middle, then you can't go from 3 all the way up to 1. Now, if our Mishnah would have been Rabbi Akiva, which it's not, then the Mishnah would have said the following: Baheres aza kisheleg, se'es kitzemer lovan, ushniala, meaning the told of se'es, is sid ha'hechal ukrum beitza. In other words, if sid ha'lovan, if sid ha'hechal is a told of se'es, which it's not. I'm sorry, sid ha'lovan, right, it's not. Is, then it comes out, here, I'll read it to you. He says, Ilu beheres lohoisa told the klal, is hu haya mitztarif l'se'es o l'kruma beitza. Shigam hu told the shel se'es. But the Mishnah says that sid ha'hechal is a told of baheres. So then it comes out that sid ha'hechal cannot be mitztarif mimonafsha. So Gemara says, if this be the case, is krum beitza nami? You know, why did you ask your kasha about sid ha'hechal? You should have asked the same kasha about krum beitza, because mimonafsha. Bahade man litzarfe. Litzarfe bahadi says, well, krum beitza can't be attached to seis because in the middle between krum beitza and seis you have what's it called? Sid ha'lava, sid ha'echel. Ha'ika sid ha'echel the other meaning. And you're going to say litzarfe bahade what? Bahade sid. Just 1 second. Right. Let's say you want to be mitzaref krum habeitza, which is number 4 on your list, the bottom, with number 3, the one right above it, which Rabbi Akiva would accept, right? In theory. And what's the one right above it is sid ha'hechal. You can't be mitzaref there because they're two told us from 2 different avos. Lav bar minahu. So basically, you know, what the Gemara is saying is, why did you ask your question, your onslaught, with regard to the possibility of reconciling Rabbi Akiva with that Mishnah, and you base your case totally on sid ha'hechal and not on krum habeitza? And here on Davav, the Gemara is saying that hi my bishlema below sid ha'hechal, etc., etc. I mean, again, that's I want to be docha perennials over here, so I'll wait till tomorrow for that. So I think we're scheduled, the Mitzvah Hashem, to get together tomorrow at 9:30. But as I warned you, you know, I was thinking of, you know, flying Teilat for tomorrow because I there's no way I can. But okay, you know, we have to hope for Siyata Dishmai. Thank God on Daf Zion, we get back to the easier parts of it. Nagayim was never my thing. I mean, I wish I had another lifetime to live and I could learn Nagayim. But okay, then have a wonderful day, everybody, and thank you.